Welcome back to the channel, my beautiful observers. It's Ava. Let me tell you a secret. The cool girl trope is the biggest scam the patriarchy ever sold us. Walking away with nothing but your dignity doesn't pay for therapy or a penthouse. Today's submission comes from a woman who learned that the hard way, woke up from a coma, and decided to play God. Let's dive into a masterclass on how to properly burn down a cheating husband's empire. The rhythmic, piercing beep of the heart monitor was the only sound tethering me to the living world. I was dying. A car crash had shattered my spine, punctured my lungs, and left me suffocating in a sterile, white hospital room. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. But Zoe Monroe stood at the foot of my bed, draped in a crisp designer trench coat that cost more than my entire life savings. Her skin was glowing, untouched by the misery that had ravaged my face over the last 8 years. She looked down at me, her eyes brimming with a sickening mixture of pity and triumph. "It's funny how fate works, isn't it, Coral?" Zoe whispered, her voice smooth like poisoned honey. "After everything, I am the one here to see you off. Consider this my final confession. You deserve that much." I wanted to turn my head away, to deny her the satisfaction of my attention, but my broken body betrayed me. I was forced to stare into the eyes of the woman who had stolen my husband, my career, and my sanity. "I fell in love with Christian the moment I saw him," Zoe continued, stepping closer, the scent of her expensive perfume suffocating the smell of antiseptic. "But for years, I had to watch him choose you. You were the brilliant architect, the perfect wife. So, I decided to correct the universe's mistake." My breath rattled in my throat. "I slept with him," she smiled, a small wicked curve of her lips. "He regretted it every single time. That wasn't enough for me. I needed him to leave you, and I knew exactly how to make that happen. So, I begged Christian for one last time, and I made absolutely sure you walked in on us." A violent tremor shook my paralyzed core. 8 years ago, when I caught them in bed, I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I stood at the door, gave them a look of absolute disgust, and said, "Keep the trash." I walked away, thinking my dignity was my shield. I filed for divorce, took nothing, and left with my head held high. But dignity doesn't pay the rent. Dignity doesn't heal the visceral trauma of ultimate betrayal. While I spiraled into severe depression, unable to design, unable to trust, Christian's career skyrocketed. He secured millions in VC funding. "Your pride made it so easy for us," Zoe laughed softly. "And the best part, the twins. Christian only stayed with me because he thought I was carrying his miracle babies. He doesn't even know I went to a premium sperm bank in Europe to get them. He loves those kids. He loves me. I rewrote my destiny, Coral, and I used your arrogance to do it." She straightened her posture, looking down at me like a god observing a crushed ant. "Enjoy your rest, Coral. You earned it." As she turned and walked out, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor, a tidal wave of agonizing regret crashed over me. I was a fool. My obsession with walking away gracefully had handed my enemies the keys to my kingdom. I let them destroy me without a single drop of blood spilled. The monitor flatlined. A deafening continuous dial tone echoed in my ears as darkness swallowed me whole. If I had one more chance, I would burn their world to the ashes. The sound was rhythmic, heavy, accompanied by muffled gasps. I blinked. The blinding white of the hospital room was gone. Instead, I was staring at a familiar mahogany door. The faint sound of laughter and clinking glasses drifted up from the floor below. The Hamptons Airbnb, our weekend getaway with Christian's most important investors and our supposed friends. My hands flew to my chest. No tubes, no blood. My lungs expanded, drawing in a sharp, deep breath of air that smelled of sea salt and expensive sandalwood. I looked down at my hands. They were flawless, unscarred. A sharp, unmistakable moan pierced through the wooden door in front of me. My blood turned to ice, and then, immediately, to boiling lava. I am back. I am actually back. This was the exact moment, the genesis of my ruin. Behind this door, my husband of 3 years was intertwining his body with my best friend. In my past life, I pushed the door open, stared at them. I let them scramble, get dressed, and spin the narrative to their advantage. Let's pause right here. Ladies, write this down. Silence isn't strength. It's a free pass for a narcissist. I've seen so many brilliant women swallow their rage just to look unbothered. But guess what? The cool girl gets a one-way ticket to Depressionsville, while the cheating duo gets a venture capital firm and a Hamptons house. Coral finally realized that dignity is a poor substitute for hard evidence and alimony. Kick the door down. Film the sweat. Make them squirm. Not this time. The cool girl died on that hospital bed. I reached into my pocket, my fingers wrapping tightly around the cold metal of my phone. I unlocked it, opened the camera, and hit record. I didn't just push the door open, I kicked it bang. The heavy wooden door slammed against the wall with a thunderous crack. The 2 bodies on the bed froze instantly. Christian's head snapped toward me, his face flushed with heat and exertion. The moment his eyes registered my presence, all the blood drained from his face, leaving him looking like a terrified corpse. His pupils dilated in sheer, unadulterated panic. Beneath him, Zoe let out a pathetic shriek, desperately clawing at the white duvet to cover her bare skin. "Coral!" Christian choked out, his voice cracking violently. He scrambled backward, nearly falling off the edge of the mattress, frantically pulling a pillow over his waist. "Coral, wait! It's not what it looks like!" I stepped into the room. I didn't cry. My face was a mask of terrifying, absolute calm. I reached behind me, grabbed the brass handle of the door, and pulled it shut. Click! I locked it. The sound of the deadbolt sliding into place echoed through the silent room like the cocking of a gun. "It looks exactly like my husband inside my best friend," I said, my voice steady, dangerously quiet. I raised my phone, the red recording light blinking steadily. "Keep going. Don't let me interrupt. I am just gathering materials for the..." Christian begged, his hands trembling so violently the pillow shook. Sweat dripped down his pale forehead. He knew exactly what was at stake. Downstairs were the very venture capitalists he had spent 2 years courting. One video, one whisper of a scandal, and his entire career would evaporate overnight. Zoe peeked out from under the duvet, her eyes wide, forcing a sudden rush of tears. "Coral, please, don't be rash. It's my fault." I seduced him. I gave him too much to drink. Don't ruin his life over my mistake. Hit me, scream at me. But please put the camera away. She was playing the martyr. She wanted me to lose my mind, to attack her, to look like the crazy, hysterical wife so Christian could play the victim later. I let out a low, dark chuckle that made both of them flinch. "Scream at you, hit you." I tilted my head, zooming in on Zoe's tear-stained, terrified face. Why would I dirty my hands on something so cheap? I took a slow step closer to the bed, the camera perfectly capturing Christian's pathetic, cowering form. "You have exactly 10 seconds to sit up straight and look into this lens, Christian," I commanded, the ice in my words freezing the air in the room. "If you break eye contact..." I hit send to the group chat downstairs. "Let's see how much funding your startup gets when the investors watch you sweating over your wife's best friend." Christian whimpered. A literal dog backed into a corner. The illusion of the brilliant, confident visionary was shattered. He dropped the pillow, pulling the sheet up to his chest, his jaw trembling as he stared directly into my camera. 10. I started counting, a cruel, triumphant smile spreading across my lips. Welcome to your new reality, Christian. 9, 8. My voice was a metronome of impending doom. I kept the camera perfectly framed on Christian's face, the man who, just minutes ago, was confidently thrusting into my best friend, was now hyperventilating, his chest heaving under the crumpled hotel Christian pleaded, his voice cracking. He reached out a trembling hand, but I took a calculated step back, keeping him entirely in focus. Downstairs, the faint clinking of champagne glasses echoed through the floorboards. The venture capitalists from Silicon Valley, the men holding the $50 million check Christian needed to launch his avant-garde design firm, were waiting for him to give his welcome toast. 7-6, what do you want? Christian finally broke, a desperate sob tearing from his throat. The polished, visionary artist facade shattered completely. He looked pathetic, small. I paused the countdown, but I didn't lower the phone. I looked down at him, my expression devoid of any warmth. In my past life, my heart would have been breaking. Now, it was just a post-nuptial agreement, I said, the words slicing through the heavy air. Drafted by my attorney by 8 a.m. tomorrow. You will transfer 100% of your equity in the startup, the deed to the Tribeca penthouse, and the exclusive intellectual property rights to the design framework you are pitching tonight. Everything goes into my name. Christian's jaw dropped. The remaining color drained from his face until he looked practically translucent. Coral, that's my life's work. You re-asking for everything I have. I can't just. 5, 4. I moved my thumb toward the send button, hovering right over the group chat icon that included his lead investor. Okay, I'll do it. I swear to God. I'll sign it, Christian screamed in a hushed, terrified whisper, throwing his hands up in surrender, sweat beaded on his forehead, dripping down his nose. He was entirely broken. Beside him, Zoe finally found her voice, her face contorted into a mask of righteous indignation. She couldn't stand seeing the man she worshipped being brought to his knees. Coral, you are a monster. You can't just strip him of his life's work because of a mistake. He loves his art. I slowly shifted my gaze to Zoe. I didn't yell. I simply looked at her the way one looks at a cockroach. Speak again, Zoe, I whispered, my tone dropping to a lethal octave, and I will personally email this video to the board of directors at your elite Upper East Side preschool. Let's see how the billionaire mothers react when they find out their children's sweet. Innocent teacher spends her weekends spreading her legs for married men. Zoe's mouth snapped shut, her eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated terror, and she shrank back against the headboard, pulling the duvet up to her chin. The fight instantly left her body. I hit stop record and slipped the phone back into my pocket. The silence in the room was deafening. Get dressed, I ordered, turning my back on them to look at myself in the hallway mirror. Not a hair out of place. My pulse was steady. Wash the sweat off your face, Christian. You have a room full of investors downstairs waiting for your brilliant pitch. Go down there, smile, and secure that funding. Don't you dare ruin my investment. Without looking back, I unlocked the door, stepped out into the hallway, and walked downstairs to join the party. Over the next 3 days, Christian transformed into the ultimate subservient dog. He signed the post-nuptial agreement, without reading a single page. When my lawyer slid the thick stack of documents across the marble kitchen island, Christian's hand shook so violently he could barely grip the pen, but he signed it, every single page. He thought he was buying time. He thought my demand for the assets was just a temporary punishment, a symptom of a scorned wife's anger. He spent his evenings cooking my favorite meals, buying absurdly expensive bouquets, and kneeling by my chair, begging for a chance to rebuild our marriage. I am going to prove to you that we are a team, Coral, he had said, just last night, looking up at me with desperate, pleading eyes. I'll share everything with you, my concepts, My blueprints. I want you to be part of my success. I played the part perfectly. I gave him just enough cold silence to keep him guilty, and just enough subtle nods to make him think I was slowly thawing. And so, he talked. He poured out every detail of the spatial design frameworks he planned to use for his massive VC pitch in 3 months. I absorbed every word, because I knew a secret. Christian wasn't a genius, he was a parasite. The core concepts he was using to secure his millions didn't belong to him. In my past life, I discovered too late that he had stolen the foundational blueprints from a brilliant reclusive designer he had briefly collaborated with years ago. It was time to take the weapon out of his hands. The following afternoon, I found myself standing outside a crumbling, graffiti-covered apartment building, deep in Brooklyn. I climbed 4 flights of stairs and knocked on a battered metal door. The door opened a crack, revealing a pair of thick, dark-rimmed glasses and terrified, darting eyes. This was Zoe Sterling. "Zoe?" I asked softly, keeping my posture relaxed. "My name is Coral. I am an event architect, and I know Christian Archer stole your work." The door tried to slam shut, but I wedged my designer heel into the frame. I didn't flinch. "I don't want any trouble," Zoe stammered, her voice trembling, laced with a severe stutter. She avoided eye contact, her fingers nervously twisting the fabric of her oversized sweater. "He said, if I ever spoke up, his lawyers would bury me. I have nothing left for him to take." "I am not here to take anything, Zoe," I said, pushing the door open just enough to step inside. The apartment was a mess of scattered blueprints, architectural models, and empty coffee cups. It was the chaotic sanctuary of a true genius. "I am here to give you your life back, and I am here to destroy him." Zoe finally looked up, her eyes narrowing behind her thick lenses. "Why would you do that? You are his wife." "Not for much longer," I replied smoothly. I pulled out a sleek folder from my bag and laid it on her cluttered desk. It was the incorporation paperwork for a new elite design firm, Sterling Thorne Architecture. "Christian thinks he is pitching his vision to the top venture capitalists in Silicon Valley in 3 months, I explained, watching Zoe's eyes scan the documents. "I want you to partner with me. You provide the raw, uncorrupted genius that he could only ever half-copy. I provide the funding, the ruthless business strategy, and the voice you hate using. We will walk into that pitch meeting, and we will slaughter him in front of the entire industry." Zoe stared at the paperwork for a long moment. The heavy silence of the Brooklyn apartment pressed down on us. Then, slowly, a sharp, unfamiliar fire ignited in her eyes. The stutter vanished as she whispered, "He took my soul. Let's take his empire." A genuine smile touched my lips for the first time in 2 lifetimes. The sword was forged as I walked out of Zoe's building and stepped into my waiting town car. My phone vibrated in my purse. I pulled it out. It was a message from an unknown number. There was no text, just a single high-resolution photo, a plastic stick, 2 stark, undeniable pink lines, a positive pregnancy test. A second later, a text bubble popped up beneath it. "We need to talk. Coral, he's not yours anymore. Zoe." I stared at the glowing screen as the town car merged into the Manhattan traffic. Most women would have shattered at the sight of that message. I just started laughing, a low, dark, breathless laugh right on schedule. "Zoe, play your ultimate card." The trap was fully set. It was time to rewrite the rules of the game. The air in our Tribeca penthouse was thick, suffocating, and entirely silent. Christian paced the length of the living room, his expensive Italian leather shoes clicking frantically against the hardwood floor. His hands were buried in his hair, tugging at the roots as if trying to rip the panic out of his own skull. Zoe sat on the edge of the velvet sofa, looking like a tragic Victorian heroine. She wore no makeup, her hair was tied back in a loose, messy bun, and she clutched a crumpled tissue in her hands. She had weaponized her vulnerability beautifully. I sat across from them, in a high-backed armchair, sipping a glass of chilled Sancerre. I watched them perform with the detached amusement of a theatre critic reviewing a terrible play. "I didn't plan this, Coral," Zoe whispered, her voice breaking perfectly on the last syllable. She looked down at her lap, letting a single tear slip down her cheek. "I swear, I was going to disappear. I was going to let you two heal. But the doctor confirmed it this morning. It's twins." Christian stopped pacing. He looked at Zoe, then at me, his face a mask of absolute terror. In my previous life, this was the moment I broke. The revelation of the twins had been the final. I had screamed, I had thrown a vase, and I had demanded an immediate divorce, leaving with nothing but the clothes on my back. This time, I took another slow sip of my wine. I let the silence stretch until Christian looked like he was going to vomit. "Twins," I repeated softly, the word rolling off my tongue like smooth glass. I set the wine glass down on the marble coaster. "How miraculous!" Christian fell to his knees in front of my chair. It was a pathetic, dramatic gesture, but he was desperate. "Coral, you have to understand the position I am in," he pleaded, his voice a frantic whisper. He grabbed the armrests of my chair, his knuckles white. "The venture capitalists from Silicon Valley are doing their final due diligence on my firm next month. If they catch wind of a scandal, a messy divorce, a pregnant mistress, they will pull the $50 million immediately. They have a strict morals clause for their founders." He took a ragged breath, looking up at me with wide, terrified eyes. "And my family's trust, my grandfather's stipulations, are archaic. If I have a child out of wedlock, I am entirely disinherited. I lose the trust fund. I lose the seed money. I lose everything." I looked down at him, my expression completely unreadable. "So, what are you proposing, Christian? That I throw you a baby shower?" "A strategic divorce," he blurted out, the words tumbling over each other. "A quiet, amicable, strategic divorce. On paper only." Zoe's head snapped up. She hadn't expected him to say that part out loud. Her eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second before the mask of sorrow slipped back into place. Christian kept talking, desperate to sell me his delusional plan. "We file for divorce immediately. I marry Zoe quietly, just to legitimize the twins for the family trust, and keep the investors in the dark. As soon as the babies are born and the VC funding clears, I divorce her. And I come back to you. We remarry." He looked at me as if he had just proposed the most brilliant, romantic sacrifice in the history of the world. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to stop myself from laughing in his face. "He actually thinks I am stupid enough to believe he would come back. You want me to step aside so you can play happy family to secure your funding," I said slowly, tracing the rim of my wine glass. "And what guarantees do I have, Christian? What stops you from just walking away with your new wife, your twins, and your $50 million company?" "The assets," Christian said immediately, his voice trembling with eager desperation. "Everything. The post-nuptial agreement we signed last week. We execute it completely. The Tribeca penthouse, the Hamptons house, my liquid cash, and 100% of my holding company's shares. I will transfer it all to you before the divorce is finalized. I will walk away with nothing but the clothes on my back and the incoming VC money." He was practically vibrating with anxiety. He thought he was outsmarting me. He thought that once the VC money hit his account, the assets he was giving me wouldn't matter. He thought his future was worth billions, making the millions he was handing over look like pocket change. Zoe shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. She didn't like this. She wanted the man, but she also wanted the lifestyle. But she kept her mouth shut, knowing that if she argued, Christian might lose the trust fund entirely. I let out a long, heavy sigh, pinching the bridge of my nose as if I was deeply, painfully conflicted. "This is humiliating, Christian," I whispered, forcing my voice to tremble just a fraction. "You are asking me to hide in the shadows while you marry the woman who destroyed our home." "I know," he sobbed, burying his face in my knees, "but it's the only way to save our future. Coral, please. I trust you with everything I have. You hold all the cards. Just let me fix this." I looked over Christian's bowed head and met Zoe's eyes. She was watching me intently, a faint, victorious smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. She thought she had won. She thought I was accepting defeat. I held her gaze for a long moment. "Fine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Call the lawyers. We execute the asset transfer tomorrow morning, and we file for divorce by noon." Christian let out a loud, shuddering breath of relief. He kissed my hands, babbling endless strings of "thank you" and "I love you." I didn't feel anything. I just watched him grovel, knowing that he had just handed me the deed to his complete destruction. The next few weeks moved with brutal efficiency. The lawyers finalized the paperwork. I watched with quiet satisfaction as every single significant asset Christian owned was legally, irrevocably transferred into my name. He signed the final divorce papers with a look of stressed relief, immediately turning his attention to his impending wedding to Zoe. They moved into a rented luxury apartment on the Upper East Side, paid for by the last dregs of his personal credit, and began planning their quiet, legitimizing ceremony. Meanwhile, I moved out of the penthouse and into a sleek, hyper-modern loft in Soho. But I wasn't resting. Every day, Zoe and I worked relentlessly in her Brooklyn apartment, finalizing the architectural models for Sterling Thorne. I took Zoe's raw, breathtaking concepts and polished them into razor-sharp, market-ready presentations. We built a portfolio so devastatingly brilliant, it made Christian's stolen work look like child's play. And then, I made a phone call. I contacted a private investigator I had hired weeks ago. "Did you find it?" I asked, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows of my loft at the Manhattan skyline. "I did, Miss Thorne," the investigator's gravelly voice replied. "It took some digging through European medical databases, but I got it. The clinic in Geneva. I have the purchase receipts, the donor profile, and the artificial insemination records, all signed by Zoe Monroe, dated 9 months ago." A slow, predatory smile spread across my face. "Send it to me via encrypted file," I ordered, "and make sure the donor's physical description is highlighted." "Understood. What are you going to do with it?" "I am going to a party," I murmured, my reflection in the glass looking sharp enough to draw blood. The divorce cooling-off period was officially over. Christian and Zoe had quietly signed their marriage certificate at City Hall yesterday, and tomorrow they were hosting a lavish, intimate baby shower to celebrate their new life and introduce Zoe to Christian's conservative, old money parents. It was time to give the happy couple my wedding gift. The Pierre Hotel's private ballroom was draped in nauseating shades of pastel yellow and mint green. Soft jazz played in the background, mingling with the clinking of champagne flutes and the hushed polite chatter of New York's upper crust. Christian had pulled out all the stops for this baby shower. He needed to prove to his conservative, old money parents and the few VC scouts in attendance that his new marriage was a blessing, not a scandal. I stood in the grand foyer, smoothing down the skirt of my crimson Alexander McQueen dress. It was a calculated choice. While the rest of the room was dressed in soft, harmless pastels, I looked like a drop of fresh blood on a white carpet. When I pushed open the double oak doors, the room didn't just quiet down, it flatlined. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. I could practically hear the collective gasp of the socialites who recognized the scorned ex-wife crashing the party. Christian was standing by a towering croquembouche, laughing with his father. The moment he saw me, the laugh died in his throat. His face went ashen, his eyes darting frantically toward the VC scouts near the bar. Zoe, glowing in a custom maternity gown, froze beside the gift table. Her hand instinctively flew to her swollen belly, her eyes narrowing into slits of pure venom. I didn't break my stride. I walked across the room with the unhurried grace of an executioner, the click of my heels echoing in the dead silence. "Coral," Christian hissed as I approached, stepping forward to block my path. He kept his voice low. "We had an agreement. You were supposed to be laying low." I tilted my head, offering him a dazzling, entirely hollow smile. "Christian, darling, I wouldn't miss the celebration of your miracle for the world. After all, I gave up my marriage for these babies. I am practically their godmother." Christian swallowed hard, a bead of sweat forming at his temple. "Please, Coral, don't make a scene. My parents are right there, the investors." "I am not here to make a scene," I interrupted smoothly. Sidestepping him, I walked directly toward Zoe, who was glaring at me with a mixture of fear and defiance. "Coral," Zoe said, her voice tight but loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. She was playing the gracious, forgiving new wife. "It's surprisingly big of you to come. We appreciate your support during this beautiful time." "Of course, Zoe," I smiled, stopping just a foot away from her. I reached into my sleek clutch and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope sealed with wax. "I brought a gift. I think it's something you'll want to open in front of everyone. A testament to how hard you worked to build this family." Zoe hesitated, her eyes dropping to the envelope. Her instincts told her it was a trap, but with Christian's parents and the investors watching, she couldn't refuse. She took it, her fingers trembling slightly. "Go ahead," I urged softly. "Open it." She pulled out a stack of crisp, official-looking documents. As her eyes scanned the first page, the color completely drained from her face. Her breath hitched, a sharp, audible gasp that echoed in the quiet room. It was the dossier from the private investigator. "What is it, sweetheart?" Christian asked, stepping up behind her, trying to maintain his charming facade for the crowd. He peered over her shoulder at the papers. I watched Christian's eyes track across the bold black text. Clinic, Geneva Premium Fertility Center. Procedure, in vitro fertilization, artificial insemination. Date, 9 months ago. Donor profile number 402. Caucasian, brown hair, green eyes, height 6'1". A perfect physical match for Christian. Total paid, $120,000. Paid in full by Zoe Monroe. It took exactly 3 seconds for Christian's brain to process the information. "What?" Christian stammered, his voice trembling as he snatched the papers from Zoe's frozen hands. He flipped to the second page, the itemized receipt with Zoe's signature. Then to the third, the donor's medical history. "It's the receipt for your miracle, Christian," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. The room erupted into a cacophony of gasps and frantic whispers. "No, no, it's a lie," Zoe shrieked, her carefully constructed mask shattering into a million pieces. She lunged for the papers, but Christian stepped back, holding them out of her reach. His hands were shaking so violently, the pages rattled. "Zoe," Christian breathed, his voice hollow, his eyes wide with a horrified, sickening realization. "So, tell me this is a fake. Tell me she forged this." "She did. She's trying to ruin us," Zoe cried, tears streaming down her face. She grabbed Christian's arm, her nails digging into his suit jacket. "Christian, look at me! I love you! Those are your babies!" "Then you won't mind a paternity test the moment they are born," I interjected smoothly, turning to face Christian's parents, who were standing frozen in shock, though I suspect the Geneva Clinic DNA registry will confirm what's on that paper. Christian looked from the papers to Zoe's terrified, guilty face, and then to me. The illusion of his perfect life, his perfect savior, was collapsing in real time. You planned this, Christian whispered to Zoe, stepping away from her as if she were diseased. You bought a donor that looked like me. You set me up. You made me leave Coral. You made me give away everything. I did it because I loved you, Zoe screamed, dropping the victim act entirely. Her face twisted into an ugly, desperate snarl. The sound of Christian's mother slapping Zoe across the face echoed like a gunshot. The elegant older woman was shaking with rage. You disgusting, manipulative little tramp, she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. You tried to pass off bought sperm as the Archer family heir. You are nothing but a gold-digging fraud. The VC scouts near the bar had seen enough. Without a word, they set their champagne glasses down and walked out of the ballroom. Christian saw them leaving. He realized, in that exact moment, that his fund and his reputation had just evaporated into thin air. He let out a guttural, agonizing scream, clutching his chest as he collapsed to his knees right in the middle of the pastel ballroom. I stood there, watching the chaos unfold. Zoe was sobbing hysterically on the floor. Christian's parents were screaming for security, and Christian was curled into a fetal position, hyperventilating. It was a masterpiece of destruction. I didn't say another word. I simply turned around, my crimson dress sweeping elegantly across the floor, and walked out of the Pierre Hotel. The trap had snapped shut, but I wasn't finished. I had taken his family and his dignity now. It was time to take his future. 2 months later, Silicon Valley, the sleek, glass-walled conference room of Apex Ventures hovered above the Palo Alto skyline like a predator's nest. This was the Olympus of the tech and design world. The men and women sitting around the massive obsidian table controlled billions in capital. Christian Archer sat at the head of the table, sweating through his custom Tom Ford suit. He was a ghost of the man he used to be. The scandal at the baby shower had done exactly what I intended. His conservative family had immediately cut him off, freezing his trust fund. The initial VC investors had fled, terrified of the PR nightmare of a founder trapped in a fraudulent paternity scandal marriage. But Christian was nothing if not a cockroach. Driven by pure desperation, he had managed to secure this one final pitch meeting with Apex Ventures. He had maxed out his credit cards, taken out high-interest loans, and bet his entire existence on the stolen architectural framework he believed was his golden ticket. Mr. Archer, the lead partner, a sharp-eyed woman named Jade, said, tapping her gold pen against the table, "Your personal life has been colorful lately. Apex Ventures does not invest in liabilities. You have exactly 20 minutes to prove that your revolutionary spatial design is worth the $50 million you re-asking for." Christian swallowed hard, forcing a tight, desperate smile. He stood up, clicking a remote to bring the massive screen behind him to life. "Thank you, Jade," Christian began, his voice slightly shaky. "What you are about to see is the future of immersive commercial architecture, a framework I call the Archer paradigm." He clicked the remote. A series of beautiful, complex 3D models appeared on the screen. They were good, breathtaking even, because they were Zoe's. Notice the fluidity of the structural flow. Christian pitched, gaining a fraction of his old confidence as he recited the lines he had memorized. It's about balancing natural guidance with free exploration. It's entirely original, unprecedented. The investors leaned in. They were impressed. The design was undeniably brilliant. Jade nodded slowly. "It's striking, Mr. Archer. But a framework this complex requires a visionary to execute it. Are you absolutely certain this intellectual property is entirely yours?" 100%, Christian lied smoothly, his chest puffing out. "Conceived and developed solely by me." Before Jade could reply, the heavy glass doors of the conference room swung open. "Actually, Jade," I said, stepping into the room, "it's a cheap, diluted copy." Every head in the room snapped toward the door. I walked in wearing a razor-sharp tailored pristine white suit, exuding an aura of absolute untouchable authority. Right beside me, clutching a sleek leather portfolio, was Zoe Sterling. She looked terrified, but her chin was held high. Christian's face went from pale to a sickly shade of grey. He gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. "Coral?" he choked out, his eyes darting wildly. What are you doing here, security?" "Sit down, Christian," Jade commanded sharply. Raising a hand to stop him, she turned her piercing gaze to me. "Miss Thorne, you requested 10 minutes of our time to present an alternative investment. I assume this is—" I smiled, walking to the front of the room and standing right beside a trembling Christian. I didn't even look at him. "Investors, allow me to introduce Zoe Sterling, the true architect behind the framework you see on that screen, and my partner at Sterling Thorne Architecture." Christian let out a panicked, breathless laugh. "This is absurd. She's my bitter ex-wife. She's just trying to sabotage me. Zoe was a low-level intern I fired years ago." "Zoe," I said softly, stepping back to give her the floor. "Show them." Zoe stepped forward. She didn't look at Christian. She plugged her tablet into the secondary port on the podium. Instantly, Christian's presentation was overridden. The screen exploded with life. It was a fully realized, hyper-detailed, mathematically flawless architectural ecosystem. It took the concepts Christian had stolen and elevated them to a level of genius he couldn't even comprehend. Beside the models were time-stamped digital blueprints, copyrighted and dated 3 years before Christian ever claimed them as his own. The investors gasped. The difference was like comparing a child's finger painting to the Sistine Chapel, the Archer paradigm. Zoe started, her voice shaking slightly before steadying into cold, hard confidence. "Is a corrupted fraction of my original thesis." He stripped away the load-bearing algorithmic structures because he didn't understand the math. "If you build his models, the structural integrity will fail within 5 years. Jade's eyes widened. She looked at Christian, her expression turning lethal. "Is this true, Mr. Archer? Are you pitching us stolen, structurally flawed IP?" "No, she's lying," Christian screamed, his voice cracking hysterically. He lunged toward Zoe, but I stepped smoothly between them, my eyes locking onto his with terrifying intensity. "It's over, Christian," I whispered. My voice meant only for him. "I took your assets. I took your fake family, and now I am taking your legacy." I turned back to the table. "Apex Ventures," I announced clearly. "Sterling Thorne is already fully funded by my private capital. Capital I legally acquired from Mr. Archer. Own asset transfer. We don't need your 50 million, but we are offering you an exclusive, ground-floor partnership for our global rollout. Provided, of course, you blacklist Christian Archer from every VC firm in Silicon Valley." Jade didn't even hesitate. She closed her folder and stood up. "Mr. Archer," Jade said, her voice dripping with disgust, "you are a fraud and a liability. Get out of my building before I call the police for attempted corporate theft." Christian collapsed into the chair. He was hyperventilating, tears streaming down his face. His empire was dead. His debt was insurmountable. He was utterly, entirely ruined. As Zoe and I walked out of the Apex building, the California sun felt warmer than it had in 2 lifetimes. A week later, back in New York, I was driving my sleek black Porsche down a quiet street. In the Upper East, Sterling Thorne had officially launched, and the industry was eating out of the palm of our hands. My phone buzzed on the dashboard. A news alert. Breaking. Disgraced architect Christian Archer involved in severe hit and run. I pulled the car over, my heart skipping a beat. I read the article. Christian, facing millions in debt and multiple lawsuits, had completely snapped. He had driven to Zoe's parents' house, where she had been staying since the baby shower disaster. According to witnesses, Zoe had run out into the street, begging him to sign the divorce papers, so she wouldn't be liable for his massive debts. In a fit of blind, psychotic rage, Christian had hit the gas. He ran her over. The article stated Zoe was in critical condition, paralyzed from the waist down. Christian had sped off, driving erratically into oncoming traffic. I stared at the screen. The universe has a dark, twisted sense of humor. They had destroyed each other. Suddenly, the blare of a massive truck horn shattered the silence. I looked up. A massive, out-of-control semi-truck had blown through the red light at the intersection ahead. It swerved, its massive tires screeching against the asphalt, hurtling directly toward my parked car. There was no time to think, no time to react. Bang, the world exploded into twisting metal, shattering glass, and agonizing pain. The exact same crushing sensation from my first life ripped through my body as the darkness rushed up to swallow me. A single terrifying thought flashed through my mind. I won. I can't die now. The darkness consumed me. No smell of burning gasoline, just the sterile, blinding white lights of a hospital ceiling. A young nurse standing by the IV, drip-dropped her clipboard. It clattered loudly against the linoleum. "Oh my God," she gasped, her eyes wide with shock. "You are awake! You are actually awake!" My throat was dry as sandpaper. I tried to move my fingers. They felt heavy, but they obeyed. What year is it?" I rasped. The nurse pressed the call button frantically. "It's 2025, honey. You've been in a coma for over 8 months since the car crashed. We thought you were gone." My breath hitched. 2025. My mind spun violently. The Hamptons, the post-nuptial agreement, the baby shower, the VC pitch, the second car crash. Was it all a dream? A coma-induced hallucination, a desperate fantasy my dying brain concocted to cope with the reality that Christian and Zoe had utterly destroyed me. Later that evening, the door to my private room swung open. Christian walked in. He wasn't the broken, sobbing mess I had left in the Apex Ventures boardroom in my dream. He looked exactly like the man who had ruined my life in the real world. Sleek, arrogant, wearing a bespoke suit, and radiating the unearned confidence of a Silicon Valley darling. Well, Christian, a patronizing smirk playing on his lips as he stood at the foot of my bed. "The doctors called. Said it was a miracle." "You look terrible, Coral." I stared at him, my heart pounding against my ribs. In this reality, I had walked away quietly. I had let him steal my dignity, my career, and my life. He had married Zoe, claimed the twins, and used Zoe's stolen designs to secure millions he had won. "You have nothing left, Coral," Christian continued, his tone dripping with fake pity. "Your savings are drained from the hospital bills. But I am a generous man. Zoe is busy with the twins, and frankly, she's lost her edge. If you want, I can set you up in a quiet apartment. You can be my little secret. I'll take care of you." I didn't scream. I just looked at him, testing the waters of my fractured reality. "Christian," I croaked, my voice eerily calm. Christian's patronizing smile vanished instantly. His eyes darted nervously, a flicker of genuine panic crossing his face. "What? How do you know that name?" "I haven't published that framework yet." "Answer the question," I demanded. My eyes locking onto his like a predator. He swallowed hard. It requires a balance between natural guidance and free exploration. But there's no failure point. It is perfect. It was the exact verbatim answer he gave in my dream. The exact flawed logic Zoe had warned me about. My pulse surged. It wasn't just a dream, a blueprint. The universe had given me an 8-month dress rehearsal to study my enemy's playbook inside and out. "Get out," I whispered, a cold, terrifying smile stretching across my face. "'Scuse me," Christian scoffed. recovering his arrogance. "I am offering you a lifeline, you ungrateful," I said. "Get out," I repeated, my voice dropping to a lethal octave. "Before I ruin you." Christian let out a harsh laugh, shaking his head as he walked to the door. "You delusional coral, you have zero capital, zero connections, and zero power. Enjoy the gutter." The door clicked shut. I immediately pressed the call button and demanded my personal belongings. The nurse brought me a plastic bag containing the items recovered from my crash. Inside was my cracked, but my hands trembled as I opened the web browser and navigated to a global cryptocurrency exchange. In my dream timeline, back in 2017, I had forced Christian to liquidate assets, and I had bought 200 Bitcoin, memorizing the 12-word seed phrase. But would it exist in this reality? Did I subconsciously remember an old wallet I had set up years ago and forgotten about? I typed in the 12 words: ocean, gravity, velvet, architect. I hit enter. The screen loaded. Wallet balance, 200.00 BTC. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred with tears. I pressed my hand over my mouth to muffle the breathless, hysterical laugh that clawed its way out of my throat. The universe didn't just give me a blueprint, it gave me a loaded gun. 3 weeks later, I discharged myself from the hospital. I didn't go to a hotel. I took a black car straight to a crumbling apartment building in Brooklyn. When Zoe Sterling opened her door, she looked exactly as she had in my dream, terrified, hiding behind thick glasses, her brilliance buried under layers of anxiety. "Zoe," I said, bypassing the introductions. "Christian Archer stole your life's work. I have $18 million in liquid capital, and I know exactly how his structural algorithm is going to fail. Let's burn his empire to the ground." Zoe stared at me. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then, the stutter I expected never came. "I've been waiting for someone to say that to me for 3 years, she whispered. The real-world execution was almost too easy. Christian had leveraged his entire life on a massive VC contract. He promised to roll out 50 Archer aesthetic, immersive galleries across the country within a year. He signed a personal guarantee, meaning if the company defaulted, the investors could seize his personal assets, his trust fund, everything. He was building a house of cards on Zoe's stolen, structurally flawed foundation. Sterling Thorn architecture launched quietly. We didn't just compete with Christian, we decimated him. We targeted his exact demographic, offering bespoke, mathematically flawless designs that made his cookie-cutter galleries look like cheap plastic. When Christian's first 3 flagship galleries opened, the architectural critics tore them apart, citing the exact load-bearing algorithmic failures Zoe and I had exposed. Within 6 months, Christian's investors pulled out. The breach of contract triggered the personal guarantee. 1 year later, I walked through the bustling aisles of a high-end organic grocery store in Manhattan, picking out ingredients for a celebratory dinner with Zoe. Sterling Thorn had just secured a massive contract in Dubai. As I reached for a bottle of truffle oil, a harsh, desperate voice caught my attention. "Please, I just forgot to scan it, I swear." I turned. Standing by the self-checkout was Zoe. She looked a decade older. Her designer clothes were replaced by cheap, faded sweats. Her hair was unwashed, her skin sallow. A security guard was pulling a stolen container of baby formula out of her oversized purse. Zoe looked up, her tear-filled eyes locking onto mine. The shock on her face was absolute. She looked at my pristine cashmere coat, my flawless makeup, the aura of undeniable wealth and power I exuded. I walked over to her, my heels clicking softly against the polished floor. The security guard stepped back slightly, intimidated by my presence. "Coral," Zoe breathed. her voice trembling with a toxic mix of shame and bitter jealousy. You did this to him. Christian had a stroke when the bank seized the house. He's paralyzed. He can't even speak. We have nothing. Some people will tell you that the best revenge is moving on and living well. Those people are boring. Coral buying the bank's debt just to schedule their eviction on a random Tuesday. That is top tier Michelin star villainy, and I am entirely here for it. We are so conditioned to be the bigger person and offer grace to those who shattered us. But sometimes closure doesn't come from forgiveness. Sometimes it comes from watching the karma you personally orchestrated hit them like a freight train. She wanted me to feel guilty. She wanted me to look at her miserable, pathetic life and offer her the grace she had never given me. I leaned in close, the scent of my expensive perfume masking the stale smell of her unwashed clothes. I know, I whispered, my voice smooth and cold as ice. I bought the bank's debt just to make sure they evicted you on a Tuesday. I hear the homeless shelters are quite crowded this time of year. Zoe's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated horror. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I straightened my posture, gave the security guard a polite nod, and walked out of the store. As I stepped into the bright, crisp New York afternoon and handed my bags to my waiting driver, I didn't look back. I had rewritten my destiny, not with tears, not with screaming, but with cold, calculated. The architect of their destruction had taken her place, and her blueprint was flawless. What a wild, intoxicating ride. You know, sitting here reading this, it hits me how much we romanticize the idea of karma. We sit around sipping our matcha lattes, hoping the universe will do our dirty work, that time will heal the wounds, and that the people who broke us will eventually get what's coming. But let's be brutally honest, my loves. The universe is lazy. In the real world, the mistress usually gets the rock. The cheater gets the promotion, and the loyal wife gets a therapist and a prescription for Lexapro. When your world is burned to the ground by the person you trusted most, you have two choices. You can sit in the ashes and play the tragic, dignified victim, or you can use those ashes to forge a weapon. I am not saying you should plot a multi-million-dollar corporate takeover, though. If you have 200 Bitcoin lying around from 2017, by all means, go for it, Queen. But I am saying that you need to stop protecting the people who destroyed you. Stop prioritizing their comfort over your justice. You owe them nothing. Not your silence, not your grace, and certainly not your cool girl compliance. Coral went from being an emotional casualty to the architect of her own justice. She realized that power doesn't come from taking the high road. It comes from owning the narrative. And honestly, turn to the comment section and let us talk. Have you ever played the cool girl during a breakup and regretted it? If you had a magic redo button or an 8-month coma blueprint, would you walk away gracefully? Or would you burn their empire to the ground? Spill the tea down below. You know I read every single. Until next time, keep your eyes open, your heart guarded, and your receipts safely backed up to the cloud. Bye, darlings.